to our third in the series of rare webinars. Today, we're talking about how we can embed the voice of the rare disease community into research and why, regardless of our background, we should all consider research as something we're interested in and engaged in. I'm Nicola Miller, Creative Director at Rare Revolution magazine, and in the background working on the tech today, I'm joined by my colleague, Becky Pender. Today's session is in partnership with Rare Patient Voice, who aim to improve the lives of those living with rare disease by including the voice of the community into vital rare research. We're thrilled to have so many of you registered today and would encourage you to take advantage of the great panel we've got joining us by using the Q&A to ask your burning questions. And if you see a question that's really important to you, you can upvote it to identify it as a hot topic. And if we don't have time to get to your questions today, we will endeavour to answer these after the session closes and feed back to you. Today's session will also be available to revisit on demand, and we'll circulate the links to this in due course. I'm really delighted to be joined by another very knowledgeable and international lineup today who will help guide us through this topic of engaging in research and what that looks like for families and how you can benefit in participation. So today we're joined by Lee Reevey, co-founder and CEO of NCBRS Worldwide, an advocacy group supporting those affected by Nicolaides-Baraitser syndrome. Hope I've said that correct. Taylor Kane, founder and executive director of Remember the Girls, an international non-profit who unite, educate and empower female carriers of X-linked genetic disorders. And Pam Kuzik, senior vice president of Rare Patient Voice, who empower patients and caregivers to share their insights with researchers, companies, and those developing products, devices and treatments to improve lives. So hello and welcome all. I'm so happy to have you with us here today. Before we dive in, I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone who took part in the poll, who helped shape today's discussion and helped us form the conversation that we're having. So let's dive straight in and start with the basics. Let's start about talking about why families should be interested in research in the first place. So Pam, I'm going to come to you first. We know that patients and caregivers have super busy lives. So why should they take time out of their busy lives to participate in research?
So the ultimate goal of research is for to develop products and services that are useful to patients. So patients are the experts and the family caregivers are experts in what kind of goes on in the day-to-day process, what the journey is like and what patients and caregivers really need. So by participating in research, they get to share their experiences, share what they like, share what they need. And then that helps pharma companies, device manufacturers, government agencies to create products and services that patients and caregivers want, but that are useful to them, that they will be able to comply with. If you create something that isn't something that it might be a great product, but if somebody isn't going to use it or it's not easy for them to use, they're not going to. And so companies need to find those things out first before they develop, before they actually put things on the market. And so the benefit for patients and caregivers at the end, if they do participate, they do share their voices and what they really need, then the products are useful and beneficial to them and to their families. The other benefit, kind of side benefit, is that, for most research, or a lot of research, they can earn honoraria for their time. So it's about not only kind of, giving their voice, but, we compensate experts all over the world for lots of things, and patients are the experts here. So we need to compensate them as well.
Thank you. And it's something we're going to touch on a bit later. So thank you for that, Pam. If I come to you, Taylor, thanks for joining us today. So does taking part in research really enable the patients and families to be heard? What's your perspective on that?
Thanks, Nicola. My perspective is research definitely enables patients and families to be heard. I think when you're a rare disease patient or caregiver in the rare disease community, you can feel so frustrated sometimes and feel like that no one's listening to you, that maybe your doctors aren't listening to you, that your family members outside your immediate family doesn't really understand what you're going through. But participating in research, in my opinion, is one way that you can really take some of that power back and feel that you're making a genuine difference in your community. I think it can be difficult sometimes when you do participate in a research study or a research survey, even, for example, and feeling like, okay, is this actually going to make a difference? But I think that organizations like Rare Patient Voice really make it easy for individuals to participate in research, and also make sure that they understand what they're participating in, what the survey or the interview, for example, what the goals are. I know sometimes I hear from people who are in patient registries that while patient registries are great and they're so important for collecting natural history data, they feel like they wish they could know what the data was actually being used for and what studies were being benefited by the data, because I feel like that's what makes you more empowered to continue engaging with research. And I think that one of the greatest things about Rare Patient Voice that enables patients and caregivers to participate in research is the fact that patients and caregivers are able to receive compensation, especially in the rare disease community. And especially if you have a rare disease yourself, or you're taking care of someone who has a rare disease, your time is already really limited. So being able to actually receive compensation is a really big incentive. But we also know that there's a really high burden of a financial burden on people in the rare disease community as well. So, being able to be in an hour survey and receive like $120, that can definitely help someone, go to afford their medication or medical bills. Obviously, it's different if you live in the US versus the UK or other countries with national insurance. But, I think that regardless of where you're living, having a rare disease is not cheap. So being able to be compensated for sharing your expertise and your lived experiences is just so empowering.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Because we know that, as you alluded to as well, Pam, that, we see experts being remunerated for their time. And up until very recently, patients haven't been treated with that same respect and value in their insights. So it's really wonderful to see that starting to come through. And I think two things that you mentioned there, Taylor, is that kind of feeling of it being daunting. I think a lot of people associate that word research with academia, and they think, oh, that's not something I could do, I can't write a paper, or they don't think of it as being really participatory, and that you don't have to be able to have the academic words to be able to participate. So I think having a platform where you make it really easy is really important. And then another thing that you said there was about the follow-up, and I know that there is a huge burden on families to participate in things, and often they never know what happened to that insight. So again, having somewhere where there is a follow-up and you can see tangible outputs in something being produced is a really powerful thing, and motivates people to get involved for sure. So yeah, thank you for that, Taylor. Lee, can I come to you? So obviously as a patient and advocacy group and leader, what's your experience in taking part in research so far? This has been part of your life for a while. So how are you managing that as an organisation?
Well, I'll start off my experience as a parent of a patient involved in research. It started pretty much from the beginning. So when my son was diagnosed, he was diagnosed by clinical features because the gene that causes Nicolet-Baraitser syndrome wasn't found. When he was clinically diagnosed, he was only the 7th known case at this time known to doctors. So following on from that clinical diagnosis, he went on to be part of the research into finding the gene that causes the syndrome. This entailed like various tests like whole exome sequencing, examinations, and many more. And being a part of that research, along with the others who had been clinically diagnosed, they were able to find the cause of the syndrome. So it's actually called the SMARCA2 gene, located on chromosome 9. So that's sort of my personal experience. And as a patient group leader, obviously we're a fairly new organisation, so we're pretty much at the beginning stages of it. We have started a global patient registry. We're involved in a project which is looking to see if facial recognition technology can determine a diagnosis where genetic testing hasn't. And we've currently got 2 researchers recruiting adult NCBRS patients to try and map out the clinical signs of the disease. And obviously that will help out to improve care plans for younger patients and raise more awareness within the clinical world. We know that patients and their family caregivers are the experts, and they are the ones with the lived experiences. So having them taking part in research is vital. It's very vital to map out a disease, improve care plans, and find treatments. We have found it sometimes hard to get them to take part in various things. But we believe with like a lot of patience and perseverance, encouragement, explaining the benefits of taking part and what we would like the results to be, does encourage a lot more to actually take part in it. And we are actually currently trying to formulate a scientific advisory board, because we believe more research is vital for our condition, and obviously for our patients and their families, and it will help the medical professionals to learn more and possibly find treatments.
Absolutely. I mean, as a relatively new organization, you're certainly doing making great strides into research. I'm interested to know whether, did you feel as a parent a real responsibility with a disease with such a low incident rate and so little known about? Did you feel a really big responsibility to participate in any research that was being presented to you?
Absolutely. It wasn't that it was forced on us. I just felt that we had to do it. You know, I was a young dad at that point. I was only 19 years old when we received that diagnosis for our son. So you can imagine, you know, receiving that, and a lot of people, they get straight onto Google to try and find information. There was nothing. And I just felt, I don't want someone else to go through that. So that's where it all started for me, pretty much.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you know, it can be difficult to get other families involved. What do you think is the biggest challenge and barrier to them wanting to perhaps get involved? Time,
and sometimes data. Where is their data going? Is it secure? Is it safe? And what is going to be done with their data? So, you know, being very clear and transparent, you know, and honest with them, what I say is the best policy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pam, if we can sort of circle back to you, we kind of understand the why a bit more, but do companies really listen to these patient experiences in their decision making? And are they taking this information and really using it to implement things? You know, is the time being well spent?
I think so. I believe that they do. And we've done, I mean, to date, we started in 2013, so we're celebrating our 10th anniversary, but we've done about 7,000 studies, and they're, you know, they're all kinds of different things. So, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint one thing. I have a really good example from one of our, someone who's actually on our team. He participated in a usability study where they were looking at different types of canes and how to improve them. And he is absolutely 100% sure that this cane was improved because they used his suggestion in that particular
brilliant
revamp of that product. But I mean, that's kind of a personal example from somebody that I know. But, you know, oftentimes we hear back from patients and they'll say, oh my gosh, I was in this, you know, I worked on this and now I saw it in an ad on TV, or I saw this product now come to market. And I remember hearing about it, maybe not by name, but hearing about what it is. So, you know, the kind of range of types of studies and things that people, you know, that these projects focus on is so varied. It could be about, you know, kind of the patient journey when someone's when a company's trying to develop a product or service, like, is this something that this community needs? What do they want? All the way through kind of testing different, you know, concepts, if it was something coming to market, you know, clinical trials, of course, but even after clinical trials, like using the before clinical trials, using patient input to improve consent forms. I've seen all of that, you know, happen, because if you ever have seen a consent form for a clinical trial, I mean, if you saw one 5-10 years ago, they're very litigious. They're not things that you necessarily understand as a regular person, but you know, there are companies out there now having patients review these forms, making sure that, you know, is this something that, you know, people understand, and then they revise that so that patients and their caregivers can understand it. So, I mean, so the long and short answer is, I do think that they do listen to patients, because they're, you know, the goal is they want to launch, if they want to launch their products, right? They want people to buy them, and they also want people to stay on those products and comply with them. So, you know, it is to their advantage. Pharma companies, device manufacturers, anyone who is creating anything for a patient, it's to their advantage to create it in such a way that patients want to use it and will continue to use it. You know, because if they don't, and patients don't like it, can't use it, it's not convenient, they've wasted an awful lot of time and money. So I do think they do listen to patients for sure.
And I'm interested, so I mean, 7,000 studies is an absolutely incredible body of work. Congratulations on that over 10 years. Have you noticed a big change? Have you noticed a shift in the way that engagement is happening and the seriousness with which they're taking those insights with the progression over that 10-year period?
So I think what I'm seeing is more. So there are more companies coming into their different parts of the product development process, where they actually start listening to patients earlier in the process. They get their inputs on sort of their likes and needs and wants in order to facilitate development of a product at an earlier stage, as opposed to developing something and then saying, here, test this out, what do you think? Like, you've wasted a lot of time and money. So I think that's one thing that I believe that patients are being involved earlier in the processes of product development, but also in a lot of different industries. So, again, I mentioned the consent forms. That wasn't happening before, where it was, lawyers developing something, creating a form, and you sign it. And now, having patient input into that, having patient input into the clinical endpoints and what should be included in a clinical trial. Again, not something anyone ever asked a patient 10 years ago. So to my knowledge, so those types of studies I'm seeing, to be more common, I'm seeing more frequently. I think the advertising and the marketing end of things, we were seeing that previously, for a long time, since the 90s, when at least in the US there was direct to consumer advertising, but more patients being involved at every level and every stage of development. I think that is something different that I've seen.